I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate you being here. You could call in. The numbers are on the top of the page at israelnewstalkradio.com. But if you have a pen and paper handy, I'll give them to you anyway. In North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 0265-00151. So it seems like every summer, since I started doing the show, I've been doing the show a few years already, it seems like every single summer, around this time of year, near the end of the summer, we have the same conversation. And it's a terrible conversation to have, and we seem to do it every single year around this time of year. And that is the conversation about Jews being attacked in broad daylight in the streets of New York City. So it's happening again. So the past couple of weeks, past couple of days, past couple of hours, Jews have been attacked in broad daylight, open daylight, right in the middle of the street in New York City. Now, I remind you that New York City probably has the most populous population of Jews, the densest population of Jews in the diaspora. There's a lot of Jews that live in New York, and they're being attacked openly in the middle of the street. The other day, a video went viral, I'm sure some of you have seen it, of two Hasidic men walking down the street in Williamsburg, New York, and two young kids, chasing after them, knocking the hats off their heads, grabbing the hats, running away with them. Another video that was circulating this week was a Hasidic man being kicked in the street and being chased into a building. Just a couple of hours ago, a couple of Jews were sprayed, again in Williamsburg, which is a predominantly Jewish area, were sprayed by fire extinguishers. They were attacked by fire extinguishers. The hate being shown to Jews is unprecedented, and it's been happening in New York for years. The attacks now are the highest level of attacks on Jews in New York in decades. So one has to wonder what's going on. One has to wonder, why are Jews constantly being attacked in broad daylight? And apparently the people who are attacking them have no fear of retribution, no fear of reprisal, no fear of consequence. We know that New York has a crazy law where you commit crimes, you get arrested and then you get released right away. There's no bail in New York, so no one holds you. You're not remanded for anything. You get arrested, you get released. So we know that there's this craziness going on. It's New York, California. There's a couple of states that have this craziness going on, where suddenly people commit hellacious crimes are not held. They're out in a couple of hours, so nobody cares about committing crimes anymore. But we have this case where Jews are the target, and one has to wonder, why are Jews the target? Now, we know that the last time Jews were attacked in broad daylight in the middle of the street on a continuous basis, it didn't end well for the Jews. We know that the last time that Jews were attacked in the middle of the street, that were beaten in the middle of the street, it really didn't end well for the Jews. I know I said it twice, but I think it was worth repeating. So what are we supposed to do now? We have a problem. There's a major problem. So actually, there's about 100 different problems that are placed into one major problem. So what is the problem? What's the first one? Let's dissect this. Let's spend our time dissecting this, and you could join in the conversation. Call in. Numbers are on the top of the page at Israel News Talk Radio. I'll give them to you anyway. 301-768-4841. In Israel, 0265-00151. Feel free to call in and join in the conversation anytime you want. I'd be more than happy to talk to you. I want your take on this anyway, so give me a call. I really don't be afraid to interrupt me. Just call in, interrupt me. I'd love to talk to you. So let's dissect the problems one by one. So problem number one is that Jews in the diaspora have this victimhood mentality. Now, what do I mean by victimhood mentality? And people, when I say these things, a lot of people look at me and say, "Oh, you're being anti-Jewish." No, not at all. Not at all. I say these things because I feel that this is things that have to change. We have to change this. If we don't change this in our mentality, if we don't change our outlook as to our place in society, which, by the way, North America probably doesn't exist anymore, but let's put that aside and say that the majority of Jews that are in North America are here by choice. They could be living in Israel. Whoever's in North America is in North America by choice. And if you're in North America by choice, then you feel that you have a place in society and you feel that you're comfortable in society. That's why you stay. There's no other reason to stay anywhere you live. There's no reason to stay there if you don't feel comfortable living there. So Jews are too comfortable living in the diaspora. The assimilation factor has taken over, and Jews have become very, very comfortable living amongst the non-Jews. This is a major problem, and this is the problem with the dispersion of Jews around the world, is that Jews tend to be chameleons. How many Jews do you know? Think about it for a second. How many people do you know that have attempted extremely hard to blend into society, to blend into the aura of what's going on around them? So we know that the assimilation rate in the United States and Canada is somewhere around 58% of. When I say the assimilation rate, I'm talking about intermarrying Jews. So we know the death rate of the Jewish religion, the death rate of Jewish culture, is about a 56%. It could be a little higher now, but it was around 56%. The last statistic I read. So we know that that's where where Jews are dying. This is the death of Judaism. At 56%, it can't survive very long. We know that Jews change their names because they want to fit into society. A name like Goldsmith is not going to make you fit into society, so they change their name. We know that Jews, they eat non-kosher and they don't keep Shabbats, they don't keep Sabbath, because they want to blend into society. They want to be like everybody around them. The problem that we have, and this is problem number one, we'll go over two or three of them over the course of the show, but problem number one that we have is that Jews who care about Judaism, Jews who are committed to Judaism, Jews who are Orthodox or who have some kind of religiosity, have done a really, really bad job teaching their community the importance of Judaism and Jewish tradition. We've done a terrible job, an unbelievably bad job. If you look at other religions, I'm going to say Islam, just because Islam is a great example. Islam is one of those religions where either you're Islamic or you're not Islamic. There's no in betweens, right? There's no gray area, and I think that's pretty much the way you should be running religions. Look, God gave you a path to follow. God gave you a lifestyle to follow. And I don't think that we should be playing with God's word. We shouldn't be parsing God's word. And so in the path that we follow, we should be following the path. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to be the same level of religiosity, but at least we should acknowledge the fact that there's a God, there's a Torah, and that we have rules that we have to follow. Now, if you choose not to follow the rules, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you. It's not for me to judge you. But at the same time, the more people that choose not to follow the rules, the more people who choose to ignore the word of God, to ignore the word of Torah, are hastening the death of Judaism in the diaspora. All right, so that's problem number one. So we know that's the problem. The rabbis of the Orthodox rabbis have done a dismal job in selling religion to the masses, when there are so many temptations out there, and we know that human nature gravitates towards the temptations. We've done a horrible job in trying to convince our children not to jump headfirst into the temptations. It drives me crazy sometimes. I used to teach in high schools, and some of the students that I have friended me on Facebook after I left the school. They friended me on Facebook. They friended me on Instagram, and I watch some of the debauchery. And I see some of the debauchery that these people are living, the debaucherous lives they're living, the godless, soulless lives that they are living. And it pains me. They went to a Jewish school They paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to a Jewish North American day school, and they are living totally un-Jewish lives. So somewhere in between teaching them about Judaism, teaching them how to live as a Jew, and the practical application of living as a Jew, somewhere between one and the other, we lost the message somewhere. The message got cut somewhere. So this is problem number one we have in the reason that we were getting beaten in the streets. This is problem number one. Now, I'm not blaming the victim. Of course not. The perpetrator should be arrested. Perpetrators of these crimes should be arrested and should be tried. And there are other factors involved. But these are some of the factors that we're not helping ourselves. And you see, when you're the victim, I don't like being a victim. So when you're the victim of a crime, when you're beaten up, when something happens to you, 90% of the blame is on the person who attacks you. But if you are not doing anything to protect yourself, if you're not doing anything to make yourself stronger, if you're not doing anything to ensure that you personally aren't getting attacked, then you are partially to blame for being the victim. If you're fighting back and you're still victimized, that's one thing. But if you're not doing anything to even mitigate the problem, then you're part of the problem. Howie Silberger, this is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. We'll be back just after this. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to give me a call. In North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 0265-00151. Those numbers are found on the top of the page at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So, we're going over some of the reasons why Jews are victims and why Judaism is falling apart in North America. This is a common theme, and every year, around this time of year, I have the same conversation, because every year around this time of the year, Jews are being attacked in the streets in New York City. And it's happening again. The last couple of weeks, tens of Jews have been attacked already in the streets of New York. The government's doing nothing to protect them. The police have not really done much to protect them. And Jews are being attacked. And we know what happened the last time Jews were attacked in the streets, and we don't want that to happen again. So, just before the break, I was telling you that one of the big problems we had was that we're a fractured nation. Now that's by design. I'm sure God designed it this way, that we're a fractured nation. You have 3 Jews and 4 opinions on what Judaism is, and that is not healthy for a religion. A coherent vision is really what's the healthiest part of the healthiest thing that you could do for any movement is a coherent vision. Now, problem number two we have, and let's just move on to problem number two. Problem number two we have is that our Jewish organizations that are there to protect us, and I use that in quotation marks because it's not really true, but the Jewish organizations that are allegedly there to protect us don't. They don't, and there's various reasons why they don't. I mean, they give good lip service. Anytime there's an attack on Jews, the ADL will get up and pontificate on how horrible it is, and you might hear from some of the other organizations that get up and they pontificate, and they stand on their soapboxes screaming that this is terrible, this is unbelievable, and something must be done, but they never do anything to change the situation. So you have to look at the situation, ask yourself, why don't they do anything to change the situation? And the answer to that question is quite simple, because it's not in their best interest. Where would the Anti-Defamation League be? And they broke off from B'nai B'rith years ago, but where would they be if there was no Jew hatred? So if we solved the problem of Jew hatred tomorrow, and Jew hatred did not exist anymore in North America, what would happen to the ADL? Well, they would dry up and die. And the reason they would dry up and die is because their entire funding campaign, all the money they make, everything that they do is based on the fact that there are haters out there attacking Jews. We count the amount of attacks on Jews. We condemn them. We fight for the rights of Jewish people everywhere. This is what they'll tell you. And of course they do, because it brings them more money. So we become a very capitalistic religion. We've become very capitalistic people, where we on one hand condemn attacks on our nation and our people and our brethren, and on the other hand hope that it continues because it's good for business. I remember years ago. Years ago, I had a conversation with one of the people running one of these advocacy organizations, and I used the term advocacy in quotation marks. And what these people had done is that they decided that they were going to go and when the Israeli government decided they were not going to negotiate with the Arabs in Israel, this group sent a delegation of Jewish people to go to Ramallah to sit with Yasser Arafat. Now, what a delegation of North American Jews could possibly accomplish when the Israeli government can't accomplish anything is beyond the scope of my understanding. I guess I'm not that well versed in hypocrisy, and I'm not that well versed in this kind of idiocy. It just doesn't work for me. But I take a look at this, and I met with one of the guys, the chairman of the group that went to meet with Arafat. They sat in Arafat's office. They hugged him. They shook his hand. They had coffee with him. They had little biscuits with him. It was a very nice get-together, nice little tea time they had with him. And I asked the guy, I asked him two questions. He was on my show years ago, and I asked him two questions. First question I asked him is, why did you do this? What was the purpose of your trip? And so, once again, out comes the soapbox. He steps up onto the soapbox, and he starts telling me that, for years the Jews have been oppressing the Palestinians, and for years we've sat by and we've watched, and it became quite evident that the Israeli government wasn't interested in negotiating a peace deal with the Palestinians. So we decided that we were going to go and we were going to try to negotiate something. And I said, who asked you to do that? Like, who died and made you the negotiator? And there was silence. And the guy says to me, nobody. And I looked at him and I said to him, nobody? So you took it upon yourself. The Israeli government came out and said, we're not negotiating anymore. There was a terror attack or there was something happened. We're not negotiating anymore. And then you took it upon yourself as a self-righteous person living in North America to make an appointment with Yasser Arafat, arch-terrorist Yasser Arafat, a man who has the blood of Jews and Americans and French people on his hands, a terrorist. You wanted to go and meet with him and thought that you could negotiate something that the Israeli government couldn't negotiate? That you would have success in coming to some kind of peace deal? That the Americans, the British, the French, the entire world, and the Israelis couldn't do? But you, the president, the volunteer president of whatever organization that you're president of, are able to do it because you're American? Isn't that laughable? I said, what did you accomplish? That was my second question. I only had two questions. There wasn't much more I could possibly ask this moron. I only had two questions. I asked him the second question. I said, what did you accomplish? He said, after a long talk with Mr. Arafat, he decided that he was going to go back to the negotiating table with the Israelis. So we accomplished that. And I looked at the guy. He was sitting right across the table from me. And I looked at him, and I had this dumbfounded look on my face. And you can't even respond. I mean, there's no words that you could say that could respond to a moronic statement like that. I said to him, all right, thanks for coming in. I sent him away. There was nothing else I wanted to ask him. The man disgusted me. So when we debase ourselves, because we want to feel self-important, so we debase ourselves to feel self-important, and we rely on these Jewish organizations that don't really care about the community and only care about self-enlargement, self-aggrandization, self-importance, then we have a big problem. We have a huge problem. Now, I know many people are going to disagree with what I'm saying here. I know many people are going to think I'm being pretty harsh on these organizations. Many people are going to say, Howie, what are you, crazy? The ADL's done great work in the United States. They fought Farrakhan, they fought this guy, they fought that guy. They've done great work. But if you think about it and just sit back and remove yourself from the emotions of Jew hatred and just look at it from an outside perspective, you'll realize that the only reason these organizations exist is because the Jew hatred exists. And if Jew hatred disappeared tomorrow, so would these organizations. There'd be no reason for them. They would vanish. And so it's in their best interest to speak out loudly about Jew hatred, but also it's in their best interest not to encourage the total eradication of it. I know it's scary, it's sad, it's unbelievable to think about that. But if you think about it logically, that's really where we stand. And you're gonna call me a cynical. You could do that. That's fine. I am a cynical, so I don't get offended. But that's the way I see it. You might see it differently, and give me a call if you do. 301-768-4841 in North America, 02-65-00151 in Israel. You can find the numbers on top of the page at israelnewstalkradio.com. Feel free to call in. Let's talk about this. Were you ever involved in one of these organizations? Maybe you were, and maybe you'll agree with me. Maybe you won't agree with me. That's fine. Let's talk. Give me a call. Numbers on the top of the page at israelnewstalkradio.com. So that's number two. Number three. We'll look at number three. The third reason that Jews are always a target is that we have this appearance that we are a weak race, that we are weak people. We give off this aura of weakness. We don't give off an aura that we're strong and mighty Jews. We give off this aura that we're weak pipsqueak Jews. And this is a problem. Much like in the Middle East. And it's amazing how a lot of people, there are many people out there who don't understand Middle Eastern mentality. But much like the Middle East, if you don't show that you're mighty, then you're weak. And if you're weak, then you're a target. And if you're weak, then stronger armies are going to take you over. This is it. I mean, the mentality is like that. If I come and hit you and you don't hit me back hard, then I'm going to hit you again. And if you don't hit me back harder, then I'm going to hit you again and again and again. And so when strong Jews get up in a community, they are usually called lunatics. Think about that for a second as we go to break. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. We'll be back just after this. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in. Numbers to call, 301-768-4841 in North America. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151. Jews are being attacked on the streets of North America and streets in New York in particular. And it's unbelievable that this is happening. It's unbelievable that there's nobody fighting back. That people who are being attacked are incapable of fighting back, and this it's almost self-destructive. So the next point I wanted to make was that we are living in a time where the signal is clear that we're no longer welcome in North America. The signal is kind of clear that when we're being beaten in the streets of major cities with large Jewish populations. There seems to be a clear message that Jews are no longer welcome. When the government doesn't get up and make a clear statement saying, hey, this has to stop and we're going to send our police force out, we're going to protect the Jews at all costs, when that doesn't happen, it's a clear statement that the Jews, maybe our welcome we have outlived our welcome in these cities. So if you're living in a place where you're obviously not wanted, if you're living in a place where you're obviously not liked, why are we not teaching our population how to defend themselves? Why is it that whenever a strong Jew gets up to defend the Jewish people, you think about people like Rabbi Meir Kahana, think about people like Irv Rubin of the Jewish Defense League, think about other Jews who have stood up to fight and to defend the Jewish people, and to put their bodies first, and to put themselves in the front, and put their people before themselves, and put themselves on the front lines to fight against Jew haters. Why are these people considered radicals and crazies? Why is it that anytime anybody gets up and to strenuously defend the Jewish people, to stand on principle and values, and Torah values and principle, They're regarded as nuts and lunatics and crazies. They're thrown into jail and they're banned from running for office. They're called racists and any other horrific slur that you could throw at them. Well, why is that? Is there any advantage to Jews coming across as weak? Is there any advantage to Jews coming across as not strong people? When you send your kid to school, and a bully comes and starts bullying your kid, and the school's not doing much to stop it, and that happens occasionally where a kid gets bullied and the school does very little to stop it. What is your advice to your child? Is your advice to stand there and just take the beating? Or is your advice saying, if he hits you, hit him back harder? If you hit him back harder, he might not hit you again, because he might be afraid that, if he hits you harder, you're going to hit him back even harder than that. Most people would say that if it's my child who's being beaten in the schoolyard, and the school's not doing anything to stop it, or even if the school is doing something to stop it, if it's my child, I will tell my child, if you get hit by a bully in the schoolyard, hit the bully back harder than the bully hit you. Normally, when a bully gets hit back harder, they stop hitting, because nobody wants to get hurt. So a bully doesn't want to get beaten up, so he looks for the weakest link. So when you don't hit back, and when you don't fight back, and when you don't argue back, and when you just sit back and or run or hide, the bully's going to keep coming after you. Remember years ago when there was some kind of incident that happened in any North American city, the federations of that city, the official Jewish community, as they like to call themselves, would organize a solidarity rally. It's always a solidarity rally. Now, these rallies weren't much, but they were solidarity. We must stand in solidarity with the people who were attacked. We must stand in solidarity with the restaurant that was firebombed. We must stand in solidarity with the man who was beaten up on the subway. We must stand in solidarity. Solidarity. That was their big word. Okay, fine. So, solidarity rally. Where were they held? In heavily guarded Jewish buildings. One second. Oh, what? I don't get it. I didn't get it then. I don't get it now. If I'm attacked on the street corner, in the middle of downtown, whatever city I'm in, somebody comes and attacks me on that street corner and does something vile to me on that street corner, and my community wants to stand up in solidarity with me, wouldn't it make more sense for them to stand on that street corner, stand in the street, and take back the street, take back the power of being in the street? What message are you sending the haters, the people who beat me up, the people who attacked? What message are you sending them when you have a solidarity rally in a heavily armed building, in a heavily defended building? The message you're sending is that we're scared and we're going to stand in solidarity, but we're going to stand in solidarity behind our armed guards. So is that really standing in solidarity? Is that really saying that we're flexing our freedom? Let me tell you about Rutgers University in Ontario, Canada. So Rutgers University in Ontario, Canada has one of the highest population of Arab students in any university in Canada. Aside from Concordia University in Montreal, which has the highest population of Arab students, Rutgers has pretty much the second highest. So there's an organization on campus at Rutgers called Hillel. It's a universal organization. They're in all university campuses. They're the Jewish organization, mostly the party organization on campus in all universities across the world. So the Hillel at Rutgers has an office. Like most universities, they have an office, and their office is the place where all Hillel events happen. So while the Chinese Student Association and the Arab Student Association and the Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights Organization and the Kite Club have events all over campus, and they rent space on campus and they do stuff on campus, Hillel does stuff only in their office. Why? Why do you think they do stuff only in their office? Because they learned their lesson. This is what I was told by one of the presidents of Hillel. When I asked the question, this is what she told me. We learned our lesson. We had a speaker come. We rented a room. We had the speaker come into the room. They were going to talk about Israel advocacy or some kind of advocacy. And a whole lot of Arabs showed up, and they shut down the speaker, and they ruined our event. And then we had a barbecue, a welcome barbecue to the Jewish students. It was on the lawn of Rutgers. We rented the space, and we had the arrangements, and security was there, and everything. We had arranged everything. And the Arab students came, and they knocked over our barbecue, and they ruined the event. So we learned our lesson. So now we have all our events in the office. Nobody bothers us. We lock the door. People come in, we lock the door, and that's it. And we do everything in the office. We hide in our hovel. Is that the way to do it? Is that really the way to show that you're strong? Okay, so you don't want to get into a confrontation. Fine. You don't want to be beaten up. Fine. If we taught every child, throughout high school and throughout elementary school, if we taught every child in North America, if we taught them martial arts, every Jewish child learned martial arts in school. It was a mandatory course. If we did that, then when they got to university, would they not be able to defend themselves when disruptors come to try to ruin the event? Would they not be able to argue the point or fight with them or at least move them away from the event? Defend themselves? Now, not everybody wants to be violent, and I get it. And not everybody has to be violent. But you should have the minimum skill to defend yourself. So that when you're running down the street in Williamsburg and two kids are chasing you, and they looked in the video, they looked to be 10 or 11 years old, that you're not scared out of your mind running down the street, that you could stop and you could confront them. And you could say, get out of my face, and stand up for yourself. The second we start doing that, the Jew haters will back off. I mean, it won't stop hating Jews. Some Jews have been hated for years, for centuries, for millenniums. But they'll back off. At least the imminent threat, the threat that's right in front of you, will back off. We have to start defending ourselves. We have to start defending our people. And we have to stop putting down the strong Jews that get up. We got to stop doing that. A couple of years ago, on a major university campus, there was an Arab event calling Israel an apartheid state and a genocidal state. So it was an apartheid state and a genocidal state. You see, it's hand in hand, two wonderful things. And it was an Arab panel talking about how Israel's performing genocide against the Arabs living in Israel, and how Israel is treating the Arabs like a apartheid state. So Israel are Nazis and they're apartheid. It seems like the propaganda machine was working overtime, trying to find every nasty thing you could call the Israelis at that point. So the event was going on a university campus because that's the only place you could hold these kind of events where you're not going to get shut down. And two young Jewish boys, decided that they were going to stop the event. They were going to at least disrupt it. I mean, you can't stop it, but they could disrupt it. And to protest. Everybody has the right to protest, right? I mean, people can walk down the streets banging pots. People can walk down into downtown cities and burn buildings down. You have the right to protest. It was proven in the last few years that, protest, you can do whatever you want, right? So these two boys went into this university, draped in Israeli flags. They walked into the room where this event was happening, and they were singing Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. And they walked up to the front of the podium, just singing the song, and they stood in front of the podium, and they were screaming, "Long live Israel! Long live Israel!" The event stopped, of course, because the disruptors came in. The event stopped, and the organizers of the event came and they started screaming at these guys, "You got to get out! It's not fair! You're breaking out! You're ruining our event!" And they kept just chanting. They stood there chanting, like strong activists will do. Security was called. Security came running in, and told these two guys they have to leave. Well, unfortunately for security, these two guys were members of. Well, they were students, so they paid to the student union, which made them members of all the clubs of the student union. And since this was a club event, they couldn't be removed because they partially paid for it. They were students. They paid their union dues. So they were told they could sit in the audience, they could watch the event, but they can't disrupt it. So the two guys went and they sat down and they watched the event. And occasionally when they said something really nasty, the two boys, draped in their Israeli flags, they never took off those Israeli flags, would scream out, "Lies, lies, lies, you're lying, you're lying, you're lying." It was more effective for them to be sitting in the audience and screaming and disrupting the event than it was for them to come in chanting. They should just come in and sat down and done that. But anyway, you live and learn. Security came to them and said to them, "You have to leave. You're disrupting the event. You can't be here. You got to go." And the two guys got up and they voluntarily left. Because they weren't there to cause a confrontation. They were there to make their point, disrupt the event, and leave. So they got up and they left. Every Jewish organization on that university campus and every major Jewish organization in that city condemned these two boys for their actions at this event. This is not the way we behave. This is not acceptable. If we don't want the Arabs to break up our events and to disrupt our events, then we can't be disrupting theirs. Wow. Really? Really? So two guys who loved Israel, and this is what you teach them in school, this is what you teach them in Jewish schools, love Israel. And this is what you teach them to, Israel became the new Judaism in North America. So love yourself, love Israel. Israel's your identity. Two guys who felt their identity was being attacked went to defend themselves and were condemned by their own people. I know it's mind-blowing when you think about it. It's completely mind-blowing. How does something like that happen? So I decided to investigate because that's what I do. So I called up two of the people who condemned these guys, vigorously, and I invited them onto my radio show. Not this show, I have one of my other shows. And I asked them, "You run a Jewish organization on campus, and your organization is on multiple campuses, so it's a pretty big organization. And you condemned these two guys who just went to defend Israel at an event that was calling Israelis Nazis and apartheid people. How do you justify doing that? How could you condemn them? You should have been praising these guys. You should have been celebrating that somebody had the nerve to get up and finally say something. That somebody had the nerve to get up and disrupt them. I mean, they come and disrupt. The pro-Palestinian propagandists get up and they disrupt Jewish events on campus all the time. And you don't condemn them either, but you condemn these boys. You never condemn the Arabs when they disrupt your events. You just kind of stop the event and that's it. It's over. But you're condemning the Jewish boys for disrupting the Arab event. I'm trying to understand why. And the guy looked at me and said to me, because that's not the way Jews behave. We are a people of negotiation. We are people of love. We are people of inclusion. And when we have a problem with something that other people are doing, that other clubs are doing, we file a written complaint, and then we have a discussion about it, and we make an agreement that they will never do that again. We do not disrupt their events. I looked at him and I said, I understand. I suppose that's why the Hillel at Rutgers University does all their events in their office. So, as long as we're not willing to defend ourselves, as long as we're not willing to fight back, as long as we're not willing to step out of our comfort zone and to make other people uncomfortable, as I do on the show, I make other people uncomfortable. That's fine. As long as we're not willing to do that, then we're always in imminent danger. So what's the solution? Where do we go from here? How do we solve this problem? I mean, I could go on and on and on about this. I mean, there's hundreds of other examples and hundreds of other points I can make. But the truth is that we could talk about this till we're blue in the face and nothing's going to change. So how do we make a concrete change? What do we do to change things? Well, there's a couple of choices, and it all depends on what your end goal is. So, choice number one, we could always pack up and move to Israel. We could always say, all right, life for American Jews, life for Jews in diaspora is over. Israel exists. It's time to go. And we could get up and we could leave and we could go to Israel. That's something we could do, no problem. And Israel has the right of return. You're Jewish, you could go to Israel anytime. And as things get worse and worse in America, Jews are being attacked in the middle of the streets now, it might be time to consider leaving. It might be time to consider going back to Israel, going to a country that you'll be accepted with open arms, going to a country where you can live among Jews and you could live among your own people. You can live in your own homeland. Now, many people have told me that they're afraid to go to Israel because of terrorism. Because they don't want to get caught in a terror attack. Unfortunately, terror attacks happen in Israel. Rockets get launched into the country. Israel is surrounded by people who don't like Israel. But the danger of living in Israel is magnified 300,000% by a biased North American media. If you believe everything you see on television and you believe everything you hear and everything you read, you should be afraid to go out on the street. You should be afraid to cross the road. Because more people die of car accidents than die of terrorism anywhere. So that should not be a factor into your decision making. But putting that aside, if you decide that you want to stay in North America, you have to take some concrete action. And taking concrete action doesn't mean building fortresses, doesn't mean spending tens of millions of dollars on security and building walls and moats and having snipers on the roof and armored buses. That's not what you should be doing. Concrete action means that Jews should be standing up for themselves, that we should be designing. We should be raising our children to be able to defend themselves. We should be raising our young to be able to defend Israel, both politically on campus with political arguments, fighting back and forth politically, and physically. We should be able to. We should be unified, meaning that we should have one vision as a people, and that vision is the survival of the Jewish people. That should be our vision. And we should hold to that vision and be uncompromising in that vision. An attack on one Jew in New York is an attack on all Jews everywhere. And until we're unified on that, we're always going to have these problems. And that is the scariest point that I'm making today. If we can't be unified, we'll always be the victims in a country where we don't have control, where we're not really all that loved. It is scary. It is sad. And I'm hoping, and I'm praying, I'm really hoping and praying that Jews in North America come to their senses, that Jews in North America understand that unity is survival. It's strength. There's a power in unity. There's a major power. We feel stronger. We feel more united. We know that we are all standing on the same page. We are all standing on the same platform. And we're all fighting for the same cause. Until we have unity, we're going to have big, big problems. And they're only going to get worse. We see it year after year. The problems are getting worse and worse. So scary. I'm Howie Silbiger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back again next week right here on Israel News Talk Radio. I want to thank you so much for being here, and I will see you again next week right here on Israel News Talk Radio.